At the reunion, I met my old classmates for the first time in 20 years. The school I attended was in a prime location within the state, so the reunion was filled with elites.
What are you doing these days, Nate?
I'm growing potatoes in the countryside, I answered with confidence. But everyone murmured,
Nobody wants to talk to the bottom of society, so get lost.
that was said by David Brown, who had been the class president. David had always looked down on me because I was different. I came from a single mother's family and had other circumstances. His words were infuriating, but getting angry would only please him. To calm myself, I took a deep breath and stood up. See you tomorrow. When I greeted him, he looked puzzled and said, Huh? It's something you'll understand tomorrow. I muttered to myself as I left the venue. My name is Nate Murphy, and I'm 46 years old. Last spring, I ended a long career and moved with my family to my wife Emily's rural hometown. I was born and raised in New York, and I always dreamed of living in the countryside. My daughter Sophia is still preschool age, so Emily and I thought now would be a good time. Emily's relatives have been potato farmers for generations, and now her brother John has taken over the farm. John has been focusing on organic farming since he took over and has secured contracts with upscale restaurants in the city, proving himself as a businessman. After training in agriculture with John, I want to have my own farm and grow vegetables. This change was sparked by a serious illness 3 years ago. Living in New York, I was dining out every day, leading an incredibly unhealthy lifestyle. I frequently drank till dawn with work colleagues, carelessly ignoring my age. Perhaps the illness was a wake-up call from God. The first thing I saw when I opened my eyes after surgery was Emily's face, a mix of various emotions that I can't forget. I thought I must never cause my precious family such distress again. Having narrowly escaped death, I reflected on my life while lying in the hospital bed. Since then, I have vowed to live a healthier life, moderating my work and socializing, even advising others on a healthy lifestyle during drinking sessions. As I focused on not just my physical, but also mental health, my desire to live in the countryside grew. It's an era where money can buy almost anything, yet I felt a lack of gratitude. It's planting season now, and the fields with neatly lined seed potatoes reflecting the distant mountains are beautiful. Though I've distanced myself from my work and friends, I'm glad I made the move. Then, an invitation to the reunion arrived at my new address, forwarded from my old one. I left it on the table, feeling indifferent, until Emily said, Go. It might be a nice break. I'm happiest right now. Besides, I never liked school. Still, I felt a slight desire to see everyone. I disliked school, but I trusted our teacher, Miss Emma Wilson. She was one of the few adults who tried to understand me as I constantly rebelled against the rigid education system.
But the fact that you received an invitation means they want you there.
Surely, Emily has a point. Maybe I'll just show my face. Encouraged by Emily, I decided to attend the reunion. As I got used to rural life, I grew tired of the crowds in New York. It's like when smokers quit and suddenly want to criticize other smokers. Despite being a city boy, I found myself muttering, New York is so cluttered, as I headed to the venue with my old friend William Jones. William is a good friend from my school days, and we occasionally go out to eat. Unfortunately, he informed me that Ms. Wilson couldn't attend because she was unwell. I was deeply disappointed not to meet Ms. Wilson, but health is irreplaceable. I hope she recovers quickly and regains her strength. This time, the organizer is a man named David, who was our class president back then and now apparently works for a major bank. Indeed, David's father was an elite bureaucrat, and he often treated me with a condescending attitude. The school I attended was a prestigious private school in a top location within the state, often attended by children of politicians and elites. However, I didn't fit into that elite group. I came from a single mother's family, but I managed to pass the tough entrance exams. Luckily, I was bright enough to keep up with the challenging lessons, but I just couldn't stand someone like David. The reason I missed school was none other than David.
Hey Nate, how have you been?
David greeted me as if he didn't care about my feelings at all. I responded with a smile as if I was greeting an old friend. Yeah, I'm doing great. You look well too, David, dressed in a fancy suit, looking every bit the banker. Then William, who was next to me, whispered in my ear.
He just became the president of East Bank. It was even in the online news. He's the youngest ever.
I see. I've been out of touch with the news since leaving the job. I extended my hand for a handshake and said, "Congratulations, Mr. President," offering my congratulations. But David ignored it. As I stood there with a frozen smile, and David's expression turned serious, William looked anxious. Reluctantly, I withdrew my hand and shoved it in my pocket.
I called you here because Ms. Wilson asked for you, but I don't consider you one of us.
Humph, I don't think of you as one of us either. I muttered to myself. David's attitude was irritating, but since I was here, I wanted to enjoy catching up with my peers. Obviously, the reunion was filled with middle-aged men and women, and I wouldn't have recognized anyone if William hadn't told me. Perhaps because many came from good families. They were well-dressed, and the women, though middle-aged, looked younger than their years. Indeed, money can halt aging. When I flattered them, saying, "Everyone looks 15 years younger," the women happily responded, "Oh, not at all." While clearly enjoying the compliment, one of them then asked me,
What are you doing now, Nate?
I answered enthusiastically, "I'm growing potatoes." Then came the response, "Potatoes?" Making me wonder if celebrities don't eat potatoes because of diets. Well, nowadays, some kids think hamburgers grow on trees like apples. The lack of visibility of food producers is a major social issue in this country. That's why I moved to the countryside with my family to grow potatoes, which are a staple food. As I was about to lecture these elite ladies on dietary habits, David, who had quite a bit to drink, his face flushed, interrupted.
Well, people without an education should just stick to farming, right?
David, smirking, placed his damp hand on my shoulder. The warm, clammy touch was disgusting, and his ignorant prejudice against farmers wiped the smile off my face. Education has nothing to do with farming. And above all, such remarks are too disrespectful towards farmers who work hard sweating in the fields. I glared at David sharply. Didn't your parents teach you to be grateful to farmers who feed you? Then David laughed and said,
Huh? Maybe that's the case in your family, growing up with a single parent and all the struggles.
I wanted to retort that such a childish speaker was unfit to be a bank president, but I held my tongue to avoid worsening the atmosphere. I was truly relieved that Ms. Wilson wasn't here. I didn't want her to see a low-level skirmish.
Come on, let's go have a drink, Mr. President.
William tried to pull David away from me, but David seemed to have something more to say and didn't move.
Is your mom still working in Manhattan?
Hey, cut it out.
William intervened, but David continued with a smirk.
She worked hard at night to send you to a good high school. You're an ungrateful son, aren't you?
When people are truly infuriated, they become stone-faced. It's said that an angry face is like a demon's mask, but that's only when there's still some composure left. Right now, I'm so angry, I don't even want to move a muscle on my face for David.
Come on.
William squeezed himself between us, trying to break it up.
Nobody wants to talk to the bottom of society, so get lost.
David said with a laugh. I took a deep breath to calm myself, remembering the lesson my mom taught me.
When someone says something unpleasant, first take a deep breath. Then, think of the faces of the people you love.
Following my mom's advice, I pictured Emily and Sophia's faces in my mind. Indeed, just like when I'm in the countryside, a refreshing feeling gently covered my anger. In that brief moment, I contemplated everything. My heart calmed, but I hadn't forgiven David's rudeness. All right, I'm going home then. See you tomorrow, I said to David with a smile, and he looked puzzled, saying, Huh? I'll be visiting your bank tomorrow for a consultation. I can tolerate insults directed at me, but I absolutely cannot forgive those aimed at my family. I left the reunion early. My mom passed away at the age of 45. I was already an adult, so I didn't so be. But it was shocking enough to affect my personal life. Only by losing her did I realize how important she was to me. However, perhaps because I had just started a business with my friends, I was too busy to be swallowed by grief. Now that I have my family, I don't think about my mom as often. But this reunion brought back more painful memories than I wanted to remember. It was the day when I had caused trouble at school. It was after school on an open class day. My mom, being exceptionally young and beautiful, received praises from both boys and girls. Everyone gathered around my desk asking, "How old is your mom?" And she looks like an actress, admiring her with envious eyes. Honestly, I was at a loss for words. It's true that my mom was physically beautiful, but hearing that alone made me feel conflicted. Because I think she never felt happy about being beautiful. Then, from a distance, David, who had been watching the scene, approached.
His mom is a butterfly of the night.
He declared triumphantly in front of the whole class. A butterfly of the night? Someone asked.
It means she works as a hostess at bar.
At his words, I stood up so fast it was as if I had kicked the chair away. The girls nearby stepped back in shock, and seeing this, other classmates moved away too. David couldn't resist trying to dominate me. Since we entered school, we had been competing for the top grades, and lately, I had been consistently outperforming him.
Just because you're losing to me in grades, don't bring up my mom.
David then bared his teeth, growled, and grabbed me by the collar. I don't remember much of the scuffle that followed, but when I came to, David was squatting, holding his reddened cheek, instantly regretting my actions. I reached out to help him up, but it was too late. He ran off to the teacher's office and sobbed to Ms. Wilson. Ms. Wilson accompanied me, and I had to go with my mom to David's house to apologize. David's house was a mansion right in the middle of an upscale residential area. And while my mom was apologizing, I could hear a large dog barking from inside the house all the while.
It's just a kid fight. I don't know how it started, but maybe Nate feels lonely. Please don't leave him alone too much.
David's mom, Kate, said, Was that a comment knowing my family situation? To tell a single mother not to leave her child alone seemed quite ignorant, looking down on us like nobility. David and his mom really infuriated me, and I couldn't help but retort.
I have better grades, so I was bragging, and we ended up fighting. But David could do better, considering his privileged environment.
Both David and Kate's faces fell. On the way home, Ms. Wilson gently placed her hand on me and said,
It really started because he mentioned your mom, didn't it? I heard it from other students. He was the first to get physical.
My mom's eyes widened in surprise. Really? I reluctantly nodded.
Nate, you're not only academically gifted, but also more mature than the other students. That might make things harder for you.
My mom thanked Ms. Wilson, and I was relieved. But when we were alone, my mom muttered something that made me realize the weight of my words.
I'm sorry I couldn't provide a better environment for you, Nate.
I hurried to say that what I said wasn't really what I felt. But my mom just gave a sad smile and didn't speak until we got home. From that day on, William was pretty much the only classmate who spoke to me, and I became somewhat of an outcast, though my grades remained at the top until I graduated from high school. However, I didn't go to college. I felt there was nothing left to learn at school. Yet my mom, not understanding my circumstances, looked desperate and asked,
You have such good grades. Why not? Is it because they talk about me?
"What did I say back? You wouldn't understand," or something like that. That was the first time my mom ever raised her hand to me. She had scolded me with words before when emotional, but she had never been physically punitive until her patience with my selfishness wore thin. I was dazed for a moment by the shock on my cheek. That must have hurt my mom's feelings even more. If I had just acted more like a rebellious child, maybe it would have lessened her guilt.
Sorry, Mom, but I don't want to go to school anymore.
My mom said nothing more. When I stopped attending school, I'm sure Ms. Wilson was surprised too. However, Ms. Wilson took the time to truly listen to me and understood.
I think Nate is someone who can carve out his own path in life without needing to be taught by adults. But if you ever have trouble, come to me anytime. I'll always be your teacher.
Knowing she recognized me as an individual meant the world to me. Her support is arguably why I've made it this far. Though I worried my mom greatly, I'm sure she would be proud of me now. With these thoughts, I headed to East Bank's headquarters, where David was. Standing in front of the building, even grander than his childhood home, I took a deep breath. Today, I came here to sever ties with the past, with David.
I didn't know Nate was the founder of that huge commerce site. Impressive for someone who only finished high school, he finally acknowledged.
So you've noticed. I sighed. Someone in his position should at least remember the names of major company CEOs. And a high school graduate being a CEO isn't uncommon. People who never question the standard education and prefer competing in a confined environment are not suited to be leaders. Prejudices often hinder business more than they help. As a mere CEO, I worry whether it's wise to have someone as biased as David leading a bank that sells trust.
So, did you come to transfer your company's assets to this bank today?
David asked with a smile. How could he think that after his rude behavior that night? Or is he lacking in imagination? In spite of my irritation, I smiled back. Actually, it's the opposite. I've decided it's time to start using my mom's savings.
Your mom's savings?
David looked puzzled. Yes, my mom passed away over 10 years ago, but I couldn't bring myself to touch the money she left. I've kept the account frozen until now, I explained, handing over the bank statement to him. He cautiously took it, looked inside, and was astounded.
$10 million.
Yeah, that's about how much was in there. I snorted.
How could a bar worker amass such an amount?
Enough already. Stop insulting my mom. She was 1,000 times more beautiful than your mom ever was.
What? My mom was once a beauty pageant winner.
A beauty contest? That must have been a serious error in judgment.
Hey you, watch your mouth.
We both stood up, heated by the low-level argument, but I found myself lost for words because of the triviality of our dispute. Listen. As I slowly sat back down, David did the same. Before my mom passed away, on her deathbed, she told me, "Your dad was an incredible man. It might be hard to believe, but he was one of the people who had a major hand in the US economy." With a serious expression, David asked, "Who was that?" "I don't know. My mom never told me. She said he was no longer in this world, and she gave me this bank statement as proof."
That's impossible.
David was rubbing his forehead, clearly in disbelief. At first, I thought it was impossible too. No matter how hard my mom worked at a high-end club in Manhattan, it seemed impossible to earn that much money.
Well, it's not entirely impossible. Being in banking for a long time, you occasionally see this. People claiming to be the secret children of tycoons. They always look like they come from the bottom.
David threw the bank statement on the desk. "Hey, that's a client's. Treat it with respect. And really, you've got a foul mouth for the bank president." I worried about the future of a bank led by someone like David. Initially, I was angry enough to transfer my money to another bank. But now, I simply couldn't trust a bank with such a president.
Humph, I'm a competent banker. But I can't stand it when someone from the bottom like you threatens my position. It's always been that way. If it weren't for you, I would have always been at the top.
Don't call me bottom. It's not a word to use for people. And as for studies, it seems my genes were just better than yours. David scowled at me. People make that face when they're confronted with the truth. As the SEAL, I've faced many people, and I've seen the faces of those who've been cornered. I didn't come here to fight with you today, and I haven't decided how I'm going to use this money yet. Depending on the circumstances, I might even invest it with your bank. Suddenly, David calmed down, straightened his posture like a banker, glanced at my expression, and cracked a slight smile.
If you say so, then we'll do our job properly. After all, Nate, you've been my friend since school.
Where does he get off saying that? I screamed internally. But first, you need to apologize. Not just to my mom, but to everyone you think of as bottom. I demanded an apology from David, looking him in the eye.
All right, I'll apologize if that's what you want.
He said, bowing his head towards me. That's not enough. I don't feel like you're really sorry. Apologize so that it comes across sincerely.
Apologize. Sincerely.
And so, David continued to bow repeatedly, trying different ways to express his apology. It became clear to me then, some things about humans just can't be changed by others' feelings. Unfortunately, David is no longer needed in my world. I interrupted his apology. That's enough, David. I don't need your apologies anymore. David looked up suddenly. I smiled and said, I've decided not to deposit this money in any bank. I'll use it myself, to support young people who will sustain the country in the future. Just then, the door opened, and a man who looked like a secretary entered and whispered something to David, causing the color to drain from his face. There must have been some trouble.
Sorry, Nate. I need to step out. We'll talk about this another time.
As I stood up, I said, "My opinion won't change. And if you remain as the president, this bank is likely to falter. I can see your future."
What? I'm different from a self-made man like you. I come from a long line of elites, not some nobody like you, carrying nothing.
It felt like I was finally hearing David's true feelings. He had only the rails that had already been laid for him from his early age. He had lived his life without choosing, but he didn't really enjoy it, did he? You're a pitiable person. I never realized that before. But you will fall. It wasn't a lie when I said I could see the future. That's why I managed to rise. But even when you can see the future, you can still stumble over the stones at your feet. God is always watching. I'll take care of the procedures later. I need to prepare the necessary documents anyway. Just do your best and take care of your health. I patted David's shoulder, who was left speechless, and left the scene. The next day, the TV and tabloids were abuzz with the scandal involving the new president of East Bank. Leaked photos of him with a young woman. Was this the reason for his haste yesterday? I suspect it was the result of internal strife. William, who is a journalist, filled me in on the details. There has been a long-standing struggle for the presidency at East Bank. David will likely be ousted soon.
Why don't you become the president, Nate?
William joked. No, I'm just a farmer in training learning to grow potatoes now. Currently, I've delegated company management to my colleagues. I've told them to call me if there's a problem, but I don't mind if they don't. A truly good company is one that runs smoothly, even without its president. I believe I've created such a perfect world within the company, and I think I've done quite well. I trust everyone involved with me, and if my colleagues decide to exclude me, I'm fine with that. It would mean that the company no longer needs me, and I accept that as the president. Then, I would just grow potatoes for my family.
By the way, I have a letter for you from Ms. Wilson.
William said, pulling out a white envelope decorated with a floral illustration from his bag. From the teacher. A wave of nostalgia washed over me. The letter detailed how she wished she could speak to me in person, but couldn't move as freely as before, and she preferred to be remembered as she was in her younger days. Ms. Wilson wrote that she had been conflicted about encouraging me to skip school. She worried if it was right for a teacher to say such things, but hearing that I was succeeding as the president relieved her. A tear came to my eye, and William teased, "Are you crying?" With autumn, the fields of ripened potato flowers are stunning. Just looking at them fills me with gratitude. Sophia plays joyfully, touching the potatoes, and recently started calling me Daddy. Before, I was away so often that she only saw me as the occasional uncle. Emily is expecting our second child. When I wrote this news to Ms. Wilson, she was delighted. Her health seems to be improving, and perhaps one day soon we'll meet again. Looking forward to that day. Today I head to the fields again,